War over Taiwan will happen sooner rather than later. Hello, welcome to Dangerous Policy, a channel aimed at intelligent people wanting to discuss important issues facing life and society. My name is Crispin, and today I want to discuss the most significant and dangerous flashpoint in the world between the United States and China, which of course is Taiwan. Most of you will know that a major civil war in the 40s between the communists and the nationalists saw the nationalists driven off mainland China, escaping to Taiwan, would have been driven off there as well if not for the intervention of the American 7th Fleet. That prevented the communists reincorporating Taiwan into the mainland and allowed two systems of government to emerge, the communists in mainland China and a democracy in Taiwan. The reincorporation of Taiwan into mainland China is the single driving raison d'etre of all Communist Party foreign policy objective in the world today. Without reincorporating Taiwan into the mainland, China cannot claim to be a global hegemonic power, and its existence as a autonomous island, or in the mind of the communist regime, a sort of rebellious province off the coast of Shanghai, is a symbol of America's ability to curtail China's growth, ambition, and global status. For this reason, that China must reincorporate Taiwan into the mainland in order to demonstrate that it once again is the apex of a Sinocentric world order, that China has reclaimed its historical place as the most powerful agent in Asia and then hence the world. And the United States equally must seriously consider whether it is able to relinquish Taiwan and maintain its credibility and strength in the Pacific Ocean. First of all, the United States has a military treaty with Taiwan, so it's obligated legally to come to its defense, but also is a sign of credibility for its other allies in Asia. If it abandons Taiwan, well, what will that mean in Korea? What will that mean in Japan or Australia or the Philippines? And how will they evaluate America's ability and willingness to challenge China's expansion across the region? Now, people can have different views on this, but the main thing is that for the first time in recent memory, the US foreign policy establishment and strategic agents are talking openly about the prospect of war over Taiwan, not in 2049, some distant part of the future, a full century after the founding of the People's Republic of China, but in Xi Jinping's own term of office, for he sees the reintegration of Taiwan as part of his legacy, and thus the immediacy of the threat is not 30 years away, but by the end of the current decade, that China will abandon any kind of peaceful reintegration with Taiwan, which clearly isn't working, and instead resort to force of arms, throwing down the gauntlet to the United States and forcing that challenge to them directly. Now, there is a new piece that has been published in Foreign Affairs magazine, and I don't want to say it's a game changer, but it is unique in that it does encapsulate the thinking of US force planners and some Chinese force planners about the immediacy of the risk, that it is not going to be 30 years from now, but as I said, by 2030, China is highly likely, if not inevitably, going to invade Taiwan. There are three different kind of scenarios that this piece talks about, and it's published by a woman called Oriana Maestro. I'll leave a link in the description. It's a very good piece. The first is that China will use sort of salami tactics against Taiwan, slowly changing the circumstances on the ground, each intervening step being small enough that it's not worth the United States militarily responding, but over time changes the circumstances on the ground such as that any resistance from Taiwan becomes absolutely futile. And we're sort of seeing that already in the South China Sea. where China begins by dredging islands, then puts, civilian facilities on those islands, and then, puts some military airstrips on those islands, and then adds military defenses and so on. So is that, the negotiation between China and the nations of the South China Sea becomes dramatically, impacted by the changed realities on the ground. Now, in the case of Taiwan, I don't think that is at all likely. First of all, the timelines we're talking about here probably extend well beyond a decade. We'd be looking at several decades of planning. And secondly, this has been China's actual policy for a while. China has sought for many years to offer Taiwan all kinds of concessions on the one hand, so trade, subsidy, taxation, and on the other hand, making Taiwan isolated in the international community, making sure that other countries cease to recognize Taiwan as a country, move embassies from Taipei to Beijing, and kind of give Taiwan a sense of inevitability. Well, that hasn't worked. Taiwan has become increasingly suspicious of Beijing, continuing to re-elect governments that are skeptical of the Chinese Communist Party. They've witnessed what's happened in Hong Kong with absolute disgust and dismay, and are deepening their relationships with other countries in the region: Japan, Philippines, India, Australia. So this isn't, if that has been China's policy, that certainly isn't likely to work. And Taiwan is hypersensitive to any kind of, minute changes, however discreet they may seem to be, and will definitely alert the international community and find its own forms of resistance. So I don't think the kind of gradual salami slice sort of approach towards Taiwan will be China's strategy, or if it is, will be successful. The second scenario that is put forward is that China will launch a preemptive strike against America's first island chain, that is Okinawa, Guam, South Korea, with a view to make it impossible functionally for America to come to Taiwan's aid, and at the same time launch a massive maritime amphibious invasion of Taiwan, presenting America with a fait accompli. Now, this second scenario, I think, is even less likely, or at least in the order that has been posited. China will have learned the lesson of Pearl Harbor. The Japanese thought that if they could launch a massive surprise attack against the United States that crippled its operations in the Pacific, America would withdraw to its part of the ocean and leave Japan to its affairs in Asia. This was, of course, the greatest miscalculation in the history of the Japanese nation. The United States saw the unprovoked attack as an absolute existential offense and did not let up or resist until such time as Japan had been absolutely crushed in total surrender. If the Chinese were to do the same, if China was to launch a preemptive strike against the United States unprovoked, then the military objective of the United States would be to expel China from Taiwan. It would be the absolute annihilation of the Chinese Communist Party and perhaps the breaking up of the Chinese state. It would be a hegemonic struggle, and I don't think China would be foolish enough to do it in that way unless their goal was to replace the United States absolutely. And China won't do that. China will be focusing on reincorporating Taiwan into the mainland, carefully signaling to the rest of the world that this is an internal affair, that this is a special case. It doesn't mean that China is seeking to expand, whatever its actual intentions are. The messaging will be it doesn't seek to expand into the territories of other sovereign nations, and that this is correcting a historical wrong, right? And to that end, the third scenario is clearly what is going to happen. China will launch an attack directly against Taiwan, ballistic missile, cyber attacks, followed by a massive maritime amphibious invasion. And then it'll be thrown to Washington as to what to do about it. Does the United States defend Taiwan, try and project power across thousands of miles of Pacific Ocean to do so, knowing that it will expand the war against China, and it may not succeed in its military objective? Well, my answer to that question is yes, it should, but that is a decision that will be difficult for any US administration to make. Once it has done so, once it commits to the defense of Taiwan, then China will attack Okinawa, Guam, these other places in the Pacific, because it wants to capture Taiwan, but will also be able to say that it is doing so in self-defense, that the United States has attacked China and it is defending itself by targeting specifically military staging areas that are being used by the United States to prevent the reincorporation of Taiwan into the mainland. It limits the scope of the military objectives. For the United States, it would be to expel China from Taiwan, prevent it from subjugating Taiwan and reintegrating it into the mainland. And China's objective would be to expel the United States from Taiwan and making sure that it couldn't intervene in the reintegration. It's absolutely in the interests of both sides to limit it to that level. Is it possible to limit it to that level? That is another question. But politically, strategically, that is the order in which events are highly likely to occur. And I do agree that we will not be waiting until 2049. This will happen around the end of this decade at the latest. And the United States, if it wishes to defend Taiwan, and I'll make another video at a future point on the merits and drawbacks of that particular decision. But if, assuming the US wishes to live up to this objective, maintain its status in the Pacific Ocean as the global hegemon, then it will need to defend Taiwan. And if it wishes to do so, it must focus on this with a single-minded objective. It can't be distracted in Europe, can't be distracted in the Middle East, has to entirely emphasize its force structure around this objective, which is certainly what China is doing right now, and be able to respond and act at very short notice. This will not happen in some time that is so distant we don't need to think about it. This is the immediate geopolitical risk of today. I will leave, as I said, a link to the relevant things in the description. There's also been a fascinating debate, intelligence squared debate on this issue. Elbridge Colby, a friend and great senior US official, has argued very strongly for the defense of Taiwan, so I'll leave a link to that as well. If you found value in this discussion, please like and subscribe. We will talk about this a lot, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much.